good alcohol amongst young people. Tonight, the focus is on depression, stigma, and therapy in Rwanda. Over 300 million people suffer from depression across the world, and Rwanda is not immune to these figures. There's a growing trend in this particular regard, and we're here to discuss this tonight with our guests and our usual resident panelists on the square. Joining us is Laure Iyaga, founder of Sana Initiative. Laure, very happy to have you here for this very important discussion.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. We are also joined, but not in the studio, with Boniface Haderimana, who is from Dera Neuropsychiatric Hospital. Boniface, we can see you. Great to have you here. How are you this evening?
How are you?
Thank you. I think we have a technical issue, but we'll readjust his volume as we go on in the show. But I'm glad to see that we are connected. As always, I'm here on the square. My name is Diana Pisi. I'm joined by Charles Haber. Great to have you on the show.
Same here, Diana. How are you?
Good. And Ephraim and Berna. Always a pleasure to have you here on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Good. So this is the conversation for this evening. But before we do, like we always do before we get into the things, in the thick of things on the square, we are going to have a weekly recap, but a mid-recap, so to speak. Ephraim, I'll start with you if there's anything you'd like to share in the week thus far.
There are a couple. I'll just drop two, keep them short. One, there was the boat ride accident that happened in Uganda that claimed a couple of lives. Condolences to the people that lost loved ones. I think it was just interesting to see why regulation and systems are necessary, and also and how even, for example, corruption can cost lives. And again, it's really tragic. I think the second one, which is in a more positive light, was that they recently landed a probe on Mars. Now, the way it's not a rover, so it's not going around the planet to look and see what's there. It's technically a space station of sorts. Landed on planet Mars to determine if the core is either stable or is liquid or solid, to determine whether it's inhabitable. I think the assumption is that the world is coming to an end, so guys are like, where do we go to next?
Over 7 billion people. So.
Exactly. So I think it was, for me, those were the two highlights of my week, yeah.
Berna?
This week was the launch of the 16 days of activism against violence against women, violence against women, which continues to be a major issue, and it's quite. Home is the place where a woman is not safe. So for anyone dealing with policy with regards to violence against women, I don't know what they're going to do about the homes. Secondly, I'm wearing green on purpose. This week we have a big meeting around the green economy, initiatives around the green economy. And my thoughts on that, I feel that the discussion has to go outside the boardrooms so that ordinary people can begin to relate to the reality of climate change, the need for sustainable development, because quite often the discussion is up there, you know, and for the ordinary person, they don't seem to understand what their role is in this whole process. For instance, at home, your lighting, can you keep at what point should you turn your lights off? Can you use less water? And also, I think for agencies like RDB, what incentives are there for the private sector to do more around the green economy? Because clearly Africa is among the fastest growing economies, but that growth is not sustainable. So how, going forward, countries provide incentives to go beyond the public sector, to have the private sector take an active role? Because on one hand, you have governments that are tapping into some of these projects, but in terms of investment, we attract investment, and we're not really paying attention to the sustainability issues. Yes.
Charles?
Well, Rwandan social media pundits are up in arms against this skin bleaching story that is going around.
You called it Koroga Festival.
Mukoroga.
You know, Koroga Festival, as I called it. Yeah. My personal impression is go and spoil yourself. Go and do whatever you want to do with you. Personally, I will not engage with you or get attracted to you if your face is Mirinda and your hands are Pepsi Cola.
But Charlie, what about you? I can see this.
No, me, I'm a very clear guy. Yeah. But I think if the war is around fake products, yeah. I think that should be very, very clear. I think it's the right thing to do. But if the war is about infringing on how somebody decides how to look, I think I have a problem with that.
I think that's not the issue. And I think there are many people who feel, who have the same sentiments. They feel that, you know, government is coming in to tell people what they should look like. I don't think so. I think it's the bigger picture of, one, most of these chemicals are actually dangerous for your health. And as much as it's an individual decision, collectively, we have a responsibility because of the healthcare system.
And I think its impact on the healthorcare system.
But I want to just say something that is
Can you wrap it up though?
Yeah, quickly. There's a government order that was passed, a ministerial order that was passed in 2016, banning these particular products. Coming back to what we keep talking about institutional coordination. From an enforcement perspective, this thing was passed by the Ministry of Health. They said that these things should not be imported. Somebody did not do that job. Now, suddenly, we always talk about this. Guys are always trying to cure things rather than preventing them. And that's what, for me, I think it's very fascinating if you truly understand that these things have been banned already. The people who are responsible for making sure that Rwandans are protected.
Actually, in a statement in this particular workshop that happened, I think on Monday, they said there was a scale of trying to get rid of these products from shops, but not on this scale before. So I think right now there's renewed vigor based on social media and what have you. Anyway, let's go to today's show. That we're here discussing depression, stigma, and therapy, and how this manifests in Rwandan society and how we address this particular challenge. I'll just like to check in with Boniface Harerimana, who's from Dera Neuropsychiatric Hospital, joining us today. RBA, if we could just hear from him. Boniface, can you hear us? Are you with us now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Fantastic.
I can hear you. Yeah.
Thank you and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So my first question, I'm going to start with you, Laure. You're a young person and you're involved in the field of mental health. And just before I ask you and the panel our key questions, if you can briefly tell us about what drew you to this particular profession, and if you can tell us just very briefly a bit about Sana initiative. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, first of all, and it's really interesting to be here. Like you said, like you mentioned, I'm the founder of Sana, which is an initiative that is all about breaking the stigma around mental health issues and raising the awareness on emotional well-being, but also without forgetting the part of reframing therapy. How it's done, but in terms of how it's perceived, especially by the young people and the older generation. Work in 4 programs or through 4 pillars, if I may use that. The first one is psychoeducation, whereby we work with academic institutions and trying to teach them a bit about the basics of mental health, not psychology, but what are the basic things that one should know about mental health, and how should one be involved and be interested and be more tuned into what's within. Creating programs, mental health programs in schools, and we also work with the corporate world, whereby we have employees assistance programs in terms of helping manage to relate better with the employees and to help employees to kind of coach and help employees to up their games and not necessarily mix the personal issues with work. So to have a way of not just disconnecting, but but a balance, a good balance.
Yeah.
The second pillar is community support, whereby we go in the community, working with the veterans, working with the women, widows, and orphans, children who are heads of families, and other people in the communities who need to hear about this. I think everyone needs to hear about this, and we also intend to start participating in Umuganda and be present, inform, be challenged, learn from them, because I think this topic is something to really put on the table and discuss. And when we talk about community, we also do panel discussions. So we understood that there's no way we can break the stigma around mental health issues if we don't create conversations. And what we do in that case is to create panel discussions, public lectures, workshops, and to call the practitioners for them to be able to discuss with the general public, the audience, on the basics of mental health, but also the technicalities of it. The third one is research. We cannot talk about mental health, this whole topic, without involving research. So we're trying to work with universities, involve them, and so there's a whole program around that. And the fourth, which is the last but not least, it's therapy. Providing therapy sessions to individuals, couples, families, working with people who have addiction issues, marriage issues, premarital, marital, and postmarital. And so therapy becomes really big. And working with adolescents, working with children. Children need therapy as well. So in brief, that's what SANA does, and. Yeah, we are a young organization.
You set up in 2015, if I'm not mistaken?
No, we started this year.
This year? Oh, 2018.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So does Sana come from the Kinyarwanda word Gusana?
Yes.
It comes from the Kinyarwanda word Gusana. It also
repair.
comes from the to mend, to renew, to repair. It also comes from the compound word Isana Mitima. So Gusani Mitima, like so.
Very interesting.
Amazing stuff that you're doing there.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So my next question to you is, based on the fact that you've now given us this background, I wanted to ask you with a particular focus on suicide. It's a tough topic, and we wanted to address it on the square. Just last week in Kigali, there were 2 alleged suicides that took place. I think you all know about this. And my question to you, and on behalf of the square, is that working with young people, or working with Rwandans in general, in terms of therapy, or people who are in depression, can you give us a sort of idea what goes through the mind of someone suffering from mental health issues or from depression, so to speak, for them to consider suicide as the final and only option?
And I think just before law comes in, it might sound as not so alarming if Diana says there were 2 cases, because that's what was reported.
Yes, I said alleged.
Number,
Yeah. So I'm quite sure, because it's a very demeaning thing if a close friend attempted suicide, you really want to keep it as secretive as possible. Yeah. So it's much more than 2, I believe. Yeah.
Hence the stigma.
Yeah.
Hence wanting to doing all things possible to break this whole stigma around mental health. And I think if you want to talk about suicide, it could be a really long thing, because there's a lot that one goes through before they get to a point where it's too dark.
Yeah. But just briefly in your
And all they can
experience,
do-
yes,
yeah.
is if it, yes.
Yeah, and all they can do is think about suicide. And the most important thing that person is dealing with is pain. Too much pain to an extent where they can't bear it anymore. Does it mean it's the only exit point? No. But I'll talk about 3 things briefly. One is the fact that we lack spaces for safe spaces for one to be vulnerable. You know, we're these strong people who want to appear strong, who want everything about us to be nothing but strong. And if we don't have safe spaces, if you can't have a loved one or a friend Because home is not just four walls. You can find a home in a friend. You know? So if you can't find a safe space in a friend to be vulnerable, and mind you, vulnerability is the only accurate measurement of courage. One is able to be vulnerable, that means the most courageous person.
So being strong all the time and not showing any cracks, showing that you're not emotional about anything, basically that's actually a weakness.
It is actually a weakness. So vulnerability is courage, and if you can't have a space in which you can be vulnerable, that's a place, that's somewhere where then you're not able to talk about your emotional issues, then you're not able to talk about what's bothering you. Number two is shame. We not only shame others, but also shame ourselves. And most people don't know how to draw the line between I did something wrong and I'm a bad person. You know, sometimes when you do something wrong, the person next to you, if they don't know how to mind their language and how to really be empathetic, they'll be like, oh my God, it's a shame. How did you get to that? So lacking a space for one to be vulnerable, shaming each other and shaming ourselves are two key things. But I think also there's when you talk about depression, about suicide, there's also depression. There's also there's trauma. There's all other sorts of disorders that can cause one to get to a point where the only way out is to just not be here. And the most the third point, which I think is one of the most important ones, is the fact that there's a lot of pressure out there. There are too many boxes to check. The list is too long. There's a list that you have on your own. There's a list that your family has for you. There's a list that your friends, your peers, and the career, and there's too much pressure to an extent where, A, you tick all the boxes and you still are not fulfilled. 2, you can't tick any of the boxes and you feel like you don't amount to anything. You can't amount to anything. So if we could be more empathetic, if we could be more tuned to not shame each other, to listen, to lean in. I call it leaning in. To lean in and be there for the other person, for the person next to you, because we heard about 2 alleged suicides this week, but last week, but last year in 2017, according to the WHO statistics, we had 900 not attempts, people who committed suicides in Rwanda.
It's World Health Organization.
Yes.
Almost 1,000 suicides committed in
And
Rwanda.
mind you, those are the reported ones.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Now
Charles was
imagine
saying.
those that are not reported. And with the whole shame thing, my shame becomes my family's shame, and my community's shame, and my country's shame. So if I, the number of people you hear that just slept and never woke up, how many of them are caused by suicide? And then the family will just cover it up, be like, oh, no, it's a shame. No, we can't talk about this. You know? So if we could be more open, which is why to create these conversations, to put things on the table, and for people to be bold enough to talk about them. And it's also interesting on the fact that when we're talking about mental health issues, it's so rare that one will come to you and be like, I'm dealing with something. We'll talk about it in a general, on a general point of view, and in terms of others are dealing with something. There's this mental health problem, and we need to be careful, and we need to lean in and everything. But it's so rare that I'm gonna come to you and be like, Diana, I'm dealing with something. And for me to be able to do that, I need to gather my courage, which is where vulnerability.
Absolutely.
Because
you know what Lo says just reminds me of a particular friend of mine. Again, back to show because we held. I'm having a drink with my friends in Remera, and this guy walks up to me, and I hadn't seen him in about 4 or 5 years. So I asked him where he was frail, but he was okay. So he told me, Charles, you don't know what I've been going through. I suffered cerebral malaria, and after that I got depressed, but I'm now fine. I'm back on my 2 legs. I'm sure I can have a beer and start my weekend. Now the guys I was with and myself who were in shock that somebody who has actually gone through cerebral malaria can be confident enough to tell people that he had gone through that. So I think the point that people like Sana, you still have a long way to go if even people like ourselves do not perceive that as an ordinary occurrence which somebody can outrightly come and say, I went through this and I am now fine. So we do have a long way to go. I think that's.
I think I'd also want to just add to that and say, you know, there's a belief, and I think probably this is probably why it's a challenge to experience vulnerability in workspaces, or at least in professional environments, is because there's a direct, or at least there's a belief that there's a correlation between aptitude or competence, your ability to deliver on a job, and the state of your mental health. And that puts people in a position where they're like, if I say that I'm dealing with this problem and I'm going through this, let's take for example a leader. A leader is facing maybe immense challenges under immense stress. And his worry is that if I say to either my partners or the people around me that I'm going through this particular problem, automatically my ability to deliver on what I've committed to deliver will be put into question, and I could possibly be let go, or it could undermine the authority I have in this organization. And I wanted you to weigh in on that.
But before she does, can we just hear from Boniface
Yes.
for reasons of technology? Boniface, are you with us? I have a question. We have a question for you.
Yes, I'm here. Yes, I'm here.
Good. So my question for you is if you can just briefly tell us what is the scale? Because we wanted, you're from Ndera Neuropsychiatric Hospital, and you also work at Ichizere Rehab Center in Kichukiro. So in your field extensively over the years, if you can give us an idea of the scale of depression in the country, in Rwanda.
Yes. Thank you very much for inviting me in such a very important discussion. Can you allow me to describe a little bit what depression is?
Yes. Please do.
Okay.
Please do.
Okay. So, depression is one of major mental health illnesses that is characterized by obstruction that affect one's function through 4 main dimensions. One is the mood. Normally, the mood is our emotions that colors our perception of the world and how we function in it. Unfortunately, during depression, the mood tends to be too sad, or irritable, flat, or empty. And another dimension is the physical aspects. People who suffer from depression, they have a lack of sleep or oversleeping. They lose considerably the body weight. And they tend also to have too much fatigue or loss of energy. Coming back to what you've been discussing, suicide ideation and during depression, it's much more linked to impairment in someone's cognition and behaviors. Depression leads to negative thinking, like feeling guilty, hopeless, worthless, that can very easily lead to having suicidal ideation and then commit suicide. They also have retardation of thinking, loss of memory, and information processing.
Boniface,
Can you hear me?
yes, like we can hear you, but if you can just now get to the context in Rwanda. Yes.
To the context of Rwanda,
The scale.
to date there have been 2 studies that investigated the prevalence rates of depression in Rwandan society. One was in 1999 by Botton. Botton and colleagues found a rate of depression that is 15.5, and another one came 9 years later by Adams and colleagues. They found in a sample of people aged between 16 and 34 a prevalence rate of 22.7. As we speak, there is another nationwide survey going on mental health issues. Probably we have much more accurate estimates after that survey.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll come back to you as the show progresses. Thank you very much, Boniface. Thank you. I just want to very quickly, because we have another question and there's a lot of social media going on. I'm hoping your questions will merge with what I have to ask Laura about a bit about stigma. And in this regard, I want to ask you, first of all, what are the core causes of people coming into rehab? In your experience in Rwanda, I know your experience is you just started this year, but I know you've been working in the field of mental health even before you started SANA. So what are the core reasons for people checking into rehab in Rwanda? And what do you think is a natural, I don't know if I should say natural, but what do you think is the general attitude of therapy amongst us as Banyarwanda? It's a 2-in-1, so.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a tough one.
And yes.
If I may just build on to that a little bit. When you look at, you know, on the square here, we're used to being very, very practical. How many of our friends and relatives whom we know who have gone through hard times, would we encourage to go to SANA Center if it existed? You always think that the guy can manage things in his home or at your home or in your own, or you can talk to him or you can avoid him or her. Or you think maybe because it's been caused by drinking or ditched by a boyfriend or girlfriend, that once he gets another dude or stops drinking, the problem will be sorted. So I really don't want to be in your shoes because our society is very complex, and I think that's where it needs to be addressed. Yes.
So how do we deal with therapy as a society? Let me start with that, maybe. I think.
Yeah, hence the stigma again.
Yes.
We have a complex society, and we want to keep our dirty laundry in our safest closets, and I think it's because these things have not been talked about a lot. We haven't been having these conversations for a long time, yeah. And if you have to look at how therapy is being approached today, I think we're making good steps in terms of, if I had to compare maybe from like in the past 10 years and the way it is today, people are more drawn in. They want to know more, and we've also been exposed to a lot. Some people have been traveling. If you have to talk about people in the urban area, people are not just traveling, but also have friends who have traveled. What we watch on TV, what people see on social media. We spend a lot of time absorbing a lot of information, some of which is related to mental health. in some instances. And I remember the first time we had the first event, a panel discussion. Afterwards, people were like, "Oh my God, we can't believe these conversations are happening in Rwanda." You know, people were more excited. We were expecting 50 to 70 people. We had about 120 people, which was a big turnout, and I was very surprised. I was like, no, I just thought my friends would come and friends of my friends. And no, which shows the need for this, which shows the fact that people want to know more, people are interested. People have been suffering in silence, and if you provide a platform, because this is, if you provide the platform for people to be able to express themselves, or to be able to be themselves in the first place, they're going to approach that. And if I have to come back to the question you asked about rehab.
What are the main causes, basically, for rehabbing?
Substance abuse, usually. And on top of that, PTSD and...
What is PTSD?
Post-traumatic stress disorders. And in a country like ours, there's no way we cannot be dealing with that. So yeah, most of it is substance abuse.
And that's alcohol.
That's alcohol.
Drugs.
That's drugs.
But it's
and
also
we want to be very careful to not treat the symptoms.
Yes.
We want to be very careful and go deep into the root cause.
Exactly.
Because what happens later is that person, if you only treat the symptoms, they'll go. And after 6 months, they'll come back.
Exactly.
And you will patch again.
Yes.
And they'll go back.
Yes.
And you know, and it becomes this cycle that, if we're not very careful, could be just vicious and keeps on happening. But I'm very sure the players in this field and the government itself are doing a good job in making sure that policies are made and centers are being. I think there are steps to be taken, and we're getting there. I think the first 20-something years have been firefighting and putting food on the table, putting kids in school, making sure that people have a life. Now that people have a life, infrastructure and economy and everything, now people that have a life, now we're looking into what's the quality of life that they have. You know, now that there's less malaria, now that there's this and that, what's the quality of life? Which is why now we're talking about early childhood development. It's not more about malnutrition. It's more about, okay, now we've done some work in that area, and now let's look holistically about the development of a child. Now it's no longer about just AIDS, but it's what draws someone to go that route, and the result become AIDS. Now it's more of we're on the right path. I believe that we're on the right path today, and we're getting there. In the next 10 years, we're going to have a whole complete different conversation than we're having today.
And just before I get to the next question, Bentner, you've been awfully quiet. I'd like to hear.
No, I've just been listening to her, and two things: the spaces that you keep talking about. I think for me it's really troubling how we allow our people to be vulnerable. Because in most cases, if someone makes a mistake, then immediately we judge and say, to hell with you, you know. And like you're saying, when there's a mistake, shame, how do you handle that, you know? Because it's not just you and then your family. And so I think the pressure that people have to go through, again, going back to the checklist, do you have your college degree? Are you working? Are you married? Do you have children? So on this checklist, if you're missing 2 or 3 things, then it adds to pressure, you know. So,
and we've talked about it on the square.
Yes.
Ephraim, I remember this was your point when we had the conversation with Bishop Ruchagu about pressure, societal pressure, familial pressure.
So there's that. But there's also, again, the nature of the changing society, that we live very busy lives. So in most families, parents rarely have the time to interact with young people. You know, there's the TV, and the parents go to work, and as long as the kids have TV, that's fine. Yeah. You know, they go to work in the morning, they come back late, the kids have gone to sleep, and there's no time to sort of have deep conversations and try to understand these children or the adolescents, what kind of pressures they're facing. So I like that you're optimistic, but when I look at the nature of our society, the way it's changing, because currently if you look at depression, it's actually high in the developed world, you know, again because livelihoods have improved and people are more worried about their bills probably than anything else. We are heading there. The cost of living is increasing, so how you deal with that, you know, is
I'd just like to hear from you, Ephraim, because I feel like I cut you off short when you were about to say something earlier on, before we go to Boniface.
I think it was around actually stigma
in
relation to the workplace, but I think I wanna throw. It's not necessarily a spanner in the works. It's more. It's
your favorite phrase.
Interesting, more than contextualized. Yeah. But the Boniface mentioned it. He mentioned a rise in statistics.
Yes.
From 1999 to the most recent survey that was done, and I can't help. And she just mentioned it. These situations being predominantly diagnosed in Western countries than they are here. And I keep thinking to myself, I'm like, isn't ignorance bliss to a certain degree? That an undiagnosed problem is a better, the idea that it only becomes a problem once we start to go look for it.
And define it.
Exactly, and I'm saying this not necessarily that I do not believe that these issues exist, but my question is, to what extent are we seeking a problem where it doesn't exist? To what extent? And I think that for me is more the span amongst the works.
Can you answer that quickly before we go to Boniface?
I don't know if I would have the right answer to that, but you just made me ask myself a question. Is it rising there because they're diagnosing it more and we're not doing that?
Yes.
Or is it because we don't have that problem? And my opinion would be we have that problem, but not many of us go to the doctors and to wherever
the spaces are limited.
The spaces are limited, and the knowledge is not everyone is interested in this, and some people, and for some people they don't even, and for them maybe abuse is normal. For someone, they'll tell you that that's all they know. You know, depression, sadness, and all those things. For them, it's
Muzungu disease.
You know, and maybe for them it's actually even normal. I just feel, you know, I'm moody, and they'll keep it in the moody context.
And probably then self-medicate and pop pills, you know, drink to deal with this.
That's even
worse. I'd like to go to the next question, and our next question is on transgenerational trauma. And there was a report in 2009 released by the late Dr. Naso Munyandamutsa, and in this 2009 report, it stated that 29% of Rwandans had PTSD, chronic post-PTSD, and the majority of them experienced depressive symptoms. So my question to you, and I'll start with Boniface. Boniface, my question to you is if you think that trauma can be passed on to children in families. And in this case, we're talking about transgenerational trauma. Do you think this is something that actually exists and that it can be passed on to children in families?
Yes, there have been some discoveries or research that emphasize your point of transgenerational transmission of PTSD. And as I know, with depression, we have two main hypotheses, one of which said people are at high risk of having depression once they have one of the parents who suffered depression. And another biology-related hypothesis also said some people, they have a dysregulation in their neurochemicals like serotonin, which means once a parent had that disturbances in the neurochemicals can pass it to their descendants. There is another conference also relating to interaction between individuals and the environment, which means people who live in families where there are mental health illnesses, they tend to suffer from, or to lack some emotional support. They need to grow and be stronger so that they can resist the mental health illnesses in the future. Yeah.
Okay.
If there is time, I will emphasize 2 points raised by my colleagues. One is about stigma. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
please go ahead. Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay. Stigma is a very complex situation because from my experience working abroad, in the UK, in Canada, and here in Rwanda, I realized none of those 3 countries has managed to overcome stigma-related problems in terms of helping people to access to available services. One of the reasons is maybe we still take mental health as a strange and shameful illness to have in the family. For others are reasons related to different societies rooted in their culture and values. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Boniface. We are going to come back to you as we close, but now I want just to hear from the panel. We've listened a bit to the experts, but I would like to hear just briefly from you, Ephraim, Brenna, and Charles, on,
if I may go first.
let me finish what I was going to ask you, specifically on transgenerational trauma. That's what I want you to focus on.
First of all, I taking off from what Dr. Boniface just said about transgeneration, I think that means passing it on from one person to another. Genetically, yes. I went to school to do things with letters, so science might be a bit scientific for me.
Yes.
But I want to pick on from what he said, that hanging around somebody who has a mental condition might make somebody depressed. That's my allusion to what he said. And just on a lighter note, I wonder whether that will make the large housing estate in Ndera very attractive. But that said,
You can't possibly
the
say
Ministry
that.
of Health has to be very deliberate in some of these things. Because what I get from, if indeed there is a transgenerational risk, or there is also another risk of being around somebody who is depressed, that it might also dampen your moods and therefore not allow you to express yourself, and also some level of distress. I've read quite a lot that distress, that stress has levels. The Ministry of Health has to be extremely deliberate about how we accommodate people with depression, with mental conditions. The same way we are very deliberate in accommodating people with physical conditions, people living with disabilities. The same way society accommodates lepers, and if you are very non-accommodative of, say, somebody who's suffering from albinism, they'll be very rough on you. The same way we dealt, were very deliberate on living with people with HIV/AIDS, and so on and so forth. So all these health conditions that we live with in our day-to-day lives, we have accommodated them, and it's because of direct government policy. It's the same way we should be treating
mental health.
mental health and depression and issues like that. Yes.
Can you, Brenna and Ephraim, just quickly give your views
just
on
to
so
re-echo what he's
yes,
saying,
yes.
I feel that if you look at our health systems, most of the time the priorities are actually determined by the donor. You know, so until monies are made available to drive initiatives, you rarely see national governments making some issues a priority. And I think mental health is actually one of them.
Actually, in a tweet, and I hope you have time to read it, someone mentioned that mental health issues in Rwanda are actually on a bigger scale than malaria.
Yes, so
I found that very interesting.
So mental health issues remain A or B.
Yes.
Again, because we are a society that treats them as, you know, it's shame and there's a lot of secrecy around it. So I think in terms of policy, we have to see initiatives, even at a smaller scale, because when someone goes to the health center, they can just have a basic conversation that can sort of give a sense of, you know, their standing, their emotional standing. Because most of the time when you go to see a doctor, it's, oh, let me take your blood pressure, and it's, oh, do you have malaria or HIV, and that's it. But, you know, we could start now looking at health issues, that, you know, the well-being as a priority. Let's not wait for the donor. I honestly
would like to say something on that. The Ministry of Health has done work in that area. Every district hospital has a clinical psychologist.
Absolutely, yes.
If I'm not mistaken, every health center, Centre de Santé, has a clinical psychologist. That being said...
And also nurses trained to recognize mental health.
Psychiatric nurses.
Yes.
We also have psychiatrists.
Yes.
The number is still small, but we're getting there. Sometimes I get challenged in terms of how much are we going to wait for the policymakers to continue doing the work for us. When I started SANA, I started as a concerned citizen. Not because I'm the expert in this field, but because I was like, I need the younger people at an early age. Depression kicks in the late teens, usually. I wanted the people in the workplace, like Ephraim mentioned, to be able to have access for managers to understand that if someone came in as an employee, very high ranking, were very well performing, and after the course of a year or 3, they're now very underperforming. It's not because they're so relaxed, and not all of them, are so relaxed and comfortable. Maybe the other day they just went through a miscarriage and they didn't even inform anybody. Maybe 2 months before that they lost a house. Maybe they lost. There's a loss is not just death. There's loss around many things. Now,
can be money, it can be divorce, it can be
it's a lot.
It's a wide range.
How much are we willing to lean in as citizens, as people who are concerned about the future? You know, when we talk about transgenerational trauma as well, if a child grows up in an environment that is so abusive verbally, you don't want to hear the words that come out.
Can I just actually build on that, because we're about to close, but I really want us to read some tweets, just 2 tweets before we close, and it's connecting to what you're talking about in terms of transgenerational trauma. So this is a tweet from Felicia, and Felicia says, yes, trauma is transmitted from parents to their offsprings. Check out this, the Tutsi genocide and transgenerational transmission of maternal stress. Epigenetics and a Biology of the HPA Axis, the World Journal of Biological Psychiatry. We're going to read another tweet, but this is some scientific
That's actually what I wanted to say.
Ephraim,
very
if you can
shortly, I was going to
yes.
say that one thing that people don't talk about around genetics is that genetics, one, are editable, but are also influenced by so many things, because by nature, we are designed to be adaptable. So what ends up happening is that parents who, by some chance, have fallen prone to this, let's say some sort of illness around mental illness, there's a way it affects that genetic makeup, and that gets transmitted to their children. So you find that some children just seem more prone to mental illness than others, and you don't know why.
And I find that very alarming. The next tweet is from someone called Lily Brown, and Lily Brown says, "It matters most to take actions. It is known that not only can the stress be transferred, it can temporarily alter one's DNA."
Exactly, yeah.
Hopefully we have avenues to deal with it, in brackets. Thankfully, the opposite is also possible, or else face a real problem down the road. I just want to, before we get to conclusions here, to hear from Boniface. Boniface, if you're still with us, I am very sure you're still with us. Can you hear us? Yes. Boniface, thanks for being with us. In the interest of time, we would like to hear your wrap-up first, your concluding remarks first, before we get to the panel. So I would like you to kindly give your final remarks on this issue on depression, stigma, and therapy within the context of Rwandan society.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to underline that depression is one of the most mental health illness we encounter in our practice. And I also want to mention that stigma is the real threat to better recovery from depression. As a result, I would encourage families, friends, and the communities to support people who suffer from depression, because there are evidence that if we put together our effort and surround our relatives suffering from depression with encouragement, understanding, they can recover from depression and contribute to the development of our communities and their families as well.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Boniface. Thank you for joining us. We can now going to go back to the panel, but I would like to thank you once again on behalf of the Square.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, final remarks on the Square? Charles,
yeah, I guess by looking at me, you want me to go first. Lo said something that really tickled my mind around how in the workplace you really have to understand why somebody is behaving in a particular and the circumstances that might lead to that. And something that came into my mind is around fall from grace. Take an example of a leader, an ambassador, or a minister, or a governor, and they're used to all these benefits. And the following week, those benefits are not there. The children are used to going to nice schools, the guy is used to an intercooler, and AC everywhere, and all of a sudden, they cannot afford. Can you imagine what goes on through that parent? Now, Lo mentioned that depression is likely to strike the younger ones more. Now, this young one who is used to being chauffeured to school, in an international school, and all of a sudden he has to get a plane and come back to Rwanda and get onto probably a school bus or get walked by a helper to a nearby public school. Can you imagine what this person would go through? So there are all these sorts of things that I think we are exposed to, and it's a wake-up call to realize that yeah, we need to know that we're living amidst this. So address shame. Yes. Yeah.
In the interest of time, I think we might not have time for concluding remarks from Ephraim and Brenna, but you know the drill. Next week we'll have concluding remarks.
And the conversation continues on Twitter.
Exactly. And Charles will be the last to have his concluding remarks. So please, if you can give us brief concluding remarks on this particular issue.
Yeah, my concluding remarks would be to encourage everybody to lean in, to be interested, to be informed. If we are the bearer of the next generation, let's really join the efforts and lean in, be informed, know what triggers you, have that self-awareness which leads to self-acceptance and adaptability. But in terms of someone to be able to just navigate this whole thing called life, which is very spiced up, with the lows and highs and everything.
Yes.
4 things. one, be present. Be in the moment. Try as much as possible to really be present for yourself and for others. Two, listen. You don't have to fix anybody. Nobody needs fixing. Maybe someone just needs someone to lean to provide an ear, to listen to them. Three, don't judge. Let's try our best to not be judgmental.
And throw in the 3.B. Do not talk about. Don't take somebody's problems and share them with other people.
Exactly. Our backs don't have ears, so don't talk behind anybody's back. And lastly, take care of your mental health. It's okay not to be okay. It's just not okay to remain that way. Take a step, and you'll be okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ephraim, Berna, and Charles. Thank you very much, Law. And to Boniface, thank you very much. Please keep the conversation going on the square, using the hashtag #TheSquareRW. I just like the fact that what I drew from this particular conversation is let's try and be a more empathetic. Yes. We've come to the end of the show. Thank you for being with us. Thank you to our sponsors, Uzi Collections and Bourbon Coffee. Catch us here next week, same time, same place. Have a good night.